Hello everyone, you are very welcome to our webinar today on our LLB Bachelor of Laws. My name is Lisa and I am the Marketing and Student Recruitment Officer at the School of Law, and today I am joined by Dr. Ronan Kennedy, who is the Programme Director of our LLB, and I'm also joined by a student of ours, Anna Carl, who will share details about her student experience. The format of today's webinar is a short presentation, and afterwards we'll have our student Anna tell you a little bit about her student experience, and then we are happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I will now pass you over to Dr. Ronan Kennedy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. Welcome along, everybody. As Lisa said, my name is Ronan Kennedy. I'm the Programme Director for the LLB. So I have overall responsibility for the programme. And really what I want to do this afternoon is give you an overview of what's involved in the programme, but also to give you some indications as to what doors it might open for you and where it might bring you further on in your career. Before I begin to do that, just a few words about myself, just not so much because I want to talk about how wonderful I am, but to give you a sense of the varied backgrounds that colleagues within the law school have, because a lot of us come with a wide variety of different experiences from outside academia or indeed very distinguished careers within academia itself. And one of the main things I'm supposed to highlight about my experience is that I'm an LLB graduate myself. My first degree is actually in commerce. It wasn't in law at all. Law was something that I came across in university and decided I liked a lot more than what I was already studying. So I then went along that track, basically, and the LLB was the stepping stone that enabled me to then continue on to graduate study in law. I did qualify as a barrister, so I have some knowledge of the roots towards practice and the reality of practice in Ireland. I decided fundamentally that an academic career was more to my liking, but I also have a mix of other experience. I was a legal researcher in our Supreme Court for a number of years, very heavily involved in the education and training activities for the judiciary as well. In that time, edited a journal known as the Judicial Studies Institute Journal at the time, now the Irish Judicial Studies Journal, which you'll find online. And again, it's important just in terms of understanding what the LLB can bring and the advantage that it has, and that you will often gain from dealing with your classmates. When I was an LLB student, I already had essentially another career. I worked in IT, worked in information systems, worked as a programmer. And it was one of the things that I really enjoyed about being an LLB student is that we had quite a mix in our class, from quite young students to people who were retired and decided that they wanted to study law for one thing or another. So sometimes you learned as much from your classmates as you did from your lecturers. A few words also about the School of Law at the University of Galway. We have been teaching law here since 1845, so we've got quite a long track record, but we're very much globally focused. We have a very strong ranking in the international university rankings. And coming back again to that theme of diversity, you can see there that we have the law school itself and the teachers and researchers who are focused on what you might consider the core law areas, things like contract law, criminal law, constitutional law. But we also have very significant research centres around disability law and policy, housing law and policy, which is a very, very topical issue in Ireland at the moment, and the Irish Centre for Human Rights, which has a very significant international dimension to its work. And obviously, human rights is a very live issue at the moment. It is in many ways under threat, but also something that a lot of people care about very intensely. And the Irish Centre for Human Rights and the researchers and the students who are based there are very much at the forefront of debates and scholarship around those issues. But you're not here to hear just about the School of Law, you're focused on the LLB. So let me talk a little bit about what that program is. It's a graduate degree. This is, I suppose, like a lot of things, an accident of history. That LLB means Bachelor of Laws, but this is not an undergraduate degree. This is a graduate degree in the Irish context. If you're looking at universities in the UK, you will see that the LLB is generally an undergraduate degree, but here, for historical reasons that are lost to time, our graduate law degree is known as an LLB. It normally has a duration of 2 or 3 years. It is possible for students who already have significant exposure to law to complete it in 1 year. Those are generally our own graduates from the BA with law. And my understanding is that many of the audience here today are international, so you probably don't fit into that category. So probably the shortest duration for the program for you will be 2 years. It is also possible to take it over the course of 3 years. Why would you spend the extra year? Essentially because it gives you more possibility to take optional modules. I'll talk about that in a little while again when I talk about the diversity of choice that is available. But the 2-year program is best thought of as an accelerator, as a shortcut to qualification as a legal professional. But it doesn't just enable you to go into work as a legal professional, as a barrister or solicitor. Obviously, that is a focus for a large number of our graduates. But there are roles in administration, there are roles in business. Law is very important in many commercial contexts. And not just the knowledge of the law, but actually the legal thinking mindset, the way in which lawyers solve problems can also be very useful in business because it requires a level of rigor and thinking about what is really the issue here that can be very valuable when you're trying to figure out how to make your business grow and progress. Also, many of our graduates go into work in government, in the civil and public service. Several of our graduates go on to careers in the media as journalists. An awful lot of what the media are dealing with are fundamentally legal issues and legal questions, whether it's reporting on the courts, reporting on the work of Parliament, reporting on the work of government, or just reporting on what is going on in the world of business. There are many legal dimensions to that. We also have a reasonably large number of our graduates now, I think it's increasing over time, who go into work in compliance, particularly working as in-house lawyers. So they're not working as available for hire by anybody, but essentially work for a single employer and assist with regulatory compliance, assist with legal issues, and will be the bridge or the liaison point with external legal advisors as necessary. And that can be quite a rewarding role, both in terms of the challenge of the task, but also sometimes also in terms of salary, which is important. We also have some of our graduates who go into the more academic fields as well. And we obviously, as academics, support our students in doing that if they want to go on to further study, master's, PhD, and so on. It can open all of those doors as well. So I've already mentioned that the LLB has a number of different durations. Let me revisit that because it is an important thing. And sometimes people find this a little bit tricky to grasp, but you can take the LLB over 2, 3, or even 4 years if you want to. The 2-year full-time program is 120 credits, and that is very much focused on professional qualification. You will not have any opportunity to take options within that program. You will take the fixed menu, essentially, that is set not by us, but is set by the external professional bodies, the Law Society of Ireland and the Honourable Society of King's Inns, which are the 2 professional bodies which govern entrance into either the solicitors or the barrister's profession, respectively, in Ireland. So that's a fast track to that. If that's what you want to do, then the 2-year LLB is for you. You will be out in as short a time as you possibly can manage. Can't make it any shorter because we need to fit all of these modules into the degree. If you take it over 3 years full time, then you have another 60 credits. You can then take from a wide range of optional modules there, and that can be very useful if you have a more specific career in mind, or you know there's an area of the law that you want to dig into in more detail, and we have appropriate options. You have the scope to take those options and to deepen that knowledge before you move on perhaps to graduate study, or you move on to the particular role that you've identified. If you have other demands on your time, you may wish to take it over 4 years part-time, so that's 45 credits a year. It's not half-time, it's 3/4 time load. And many of students can juggle that then successfully with with their work or their other commitments. I think there may be some from Ireland here and perhaps some from Galway. So if you've already been through the Galway University undergraduate degrees, and if you've taken any of the programs that are mentioned there, you might want to note that if you've taken the BA with law, you've got 70 credits of law or more, then you can progress into year 3 of the 3-year LLB. It's commonly known as the 1-year LLB. It's not really a 1-year LLB. You actually just come into year 3 of a 3-year program. We forgive you the first 2 years. The same applies for graduates from the BA Government. The students from the BA Human Rights and the Bachelor of Commerce, which was my original degree, we will admit you into 2nd year of the 3-year LLB. So that can shortcut the process by a year. If you happen to be in that first category there, if you're a BA in law, you don't need to actually apply externally, but the others will need to apply externally if they want to avail of that discount essentially on the duration of the program. Why would you want to go on to do the LLB? Well, essentially, the reason that most people have for doing it is very career focused. You will then have what we call colloquially a full law degree. You will have the opportunity to complete all of the modules that are examined in what are known as the FE1 entrance examinations, which are the entrance exams for the Law Society of Ireland if you intend to go on to become a solicitor, and also all of the modules that are required for the barrister entrance exams for the Honourable Society of King's Inns. King's Inns operates a slightly different setup in which there are modules that you need to take in your degree, and then there are modules in which you sit an entrance exam, and we cover all of those bases. So you're ready to go on to practice down whichever route it is you think is the best fit for you. But more broadly, the LLB also enhances your employability. We have a strong focus on skills, not just simply learning a bunch of law off by heart. That's actually not really a good way to teach, I think, in general. We focus on skills on things like legal research and writing, but also presentation skills, on group work, and on critical thinking, which is really where it's about. And many of our graduates go on to success with those skills. Often, and you can see it from the particular student testimonial that's on the slide there, in areas that are not your traditional legal career. So Connor, I remember Connor as a student in that IT law module, which I teach quite a number of years ago. And he's moved in an area which is very much has a legal dimension to it, but is public policy rather than strictly speaking law. And that, I think, is a testament to the efforts that we make to give our students a more rounded education that is not simply about rote learning about a bunch of rules. So what are the key features of the LLB? Well, as I said, we focus a lot on skills. We work with students. A lot of students, for example, have the opportunity to participate in a moot court. So they learn how to construct complex legal arguments, how to communicate those effectively, how to engage in rigorous legal research. Sometimes said that a good lawyer doesn't actually know what the law is, but they know where to find it. And certainly that's true of a lot of my work. Detailed questions, I'm often unsure, but I know exactly how to find the answer to something, and I can do it very quickly. And legal writing skills so that you can communicate effectively. If you're in the longer versions of the program and you have the opportunity to take options, we have quite a range of different possibilities available to you. So things like housing law and policies, that's quite a topical issue in the Irish context at the moment. But I also teach a module called Lawyering, Innovation and Technology, for example, and that module is focused on what's sometimes called law tech or legal tech, where lawyers are now increasingly using information technology as a key tool of their daily work. We've moved very much away from quills and ink and so on. So in that module, students work to build apps in an access to justice context focused on human rights, trying to think about how you can use these new technologies in order to better vindicate people's human rights in specific contexts. So that just gives you a flavor of the range of topics that's on offer. Obviously, traditional legal topics like criminal law, which will be part of pretty much any law degree, but we also do some things here in Galway that are actually quite unique. You won't find modules like housing law and policy or lawyering, innovation and technology in any other Irish law school. The moot court is available as an option for students in the 3-year and 4-year program. And as I said, that gives you an opportunity to really practice those legal advocacy skills. And we bring in barristers and we bring in judges, real judges, to participate in that process at the end. We have a clinical placement option as well. Again, you need to be in a 3-year and 4-year program. And there's an application involved in that. We try to match students up with appropriate placements. But when that works out, students find that very, very valuable because they have an opportunity to try out the new skills and knowledge that they are learning in the classroom in a real world context with experienced mentors. They find that very valuable, connecting up those two things, and it enhances employability a great deal. And we also provide, in terms of employability, we provide quite a lot of career support. Some of that is informal. We, myself, my colleagues, will regularly speak to students about career options. In fact, tomorrow afternoon, I've got somebody coming to see me to talk about careers, alternative careers in environmental law, which is one of my particular fields of knowledge. But we also have a career development center here on campus. We work closely with them. We organize a careers in law week every year, for example. So students get a lot of very structured information on careers as well to help them build their options for the future. What's the experience of being an LLB student like? Well, Anna's going to talk about that from her side, and I think probably she's going to give you a better understanding of what it's like. But the approach to teaching is quite close to the undergraduate experience, I would say. It depends on the module. We are restricted to a certain extent because for what we call sometimes the core subjects, the ones that are required by the external professional bodies, they tend to want traditional closed book end of term examinations and to be quite focused on a particular curriculum. So we don't have as much scope to deviate from that. And therefore you have a lot of more traditional lectures and traditional examinations. Once you're outside of that scope, we have much more scope to introduce continuous assessment and more innovative forms of assessment. So I use a lot of things like multiple choice questions and gathering of news stories and presentations and a lot of group work in my modules where I can, because I think that helps the students learn material better, but it also very much enhances employability. In terms of your contact time as a student, you're looking at about 12 hours a week. On average, it can go up and down. You may have tutorials in particular periods of the year, and then you have periods of the year which are quieter. That doesn't mean you only need to be a student for those 10 to 12 hours a week. If you're taking it seriously, you need to be reading for 2 or 3 hours for every hour you have in the classroom. So it really is full-time. If you're a full-time student, you need to be putting aside 35 to 40 hours a week as a student if you really want to get the most out of the experience. But we try not to overtax people either. If those of you who are from outside Ireland, who are in Ireland and want to think about transferring elsewhere, we do what we can to support students with this. For other jurisdictions other than Ireland, it is sometimes difficult for us to say categorically this will work out because the bar authorities will change their requirements and they generally will not accredit one of our degrees as such. We have accreditation within Ireland. Accreditation outside Ireland is generally not possible for an Irish-based university. So you do need to check for a particular jurisdiction that you're interested in. And certainly if you have questions with that in that regard, I'm happy to work with you on that. But we do have graduates who have qualified overseas in Canada, in the UK. Many of our graduates go to the UK and to New York State as well. If you can get qualified then within New York State, you can then begin the process of transferring to other state bars within the US. And you have a testimonial there on that slide from just one of our Canadian graduates who came here, who had a very enjoyable time as a student, and then was able to go back to Ottawa and to practice law there with a law degree from Ireland. If you are sufficiently interested in the LLB after hearing this and hearing from Anna and whatever questions you might have, we are happy to take your applications. You will need what's known in the Irish context as a level H degree, in other words, an undergraduate university degree or equivalent in any discipline. It doesn't need to involve law at all, to a second-class honours level, what's colloquially known as a 2-2, whatever that converts to from your own system. If you don't have that level of qualification, or indeed any, on a case-by-case basis, we will look at other types of education or work experience. We do take a holistic view of candidates, particularly those who have been out in the workplace for a number of years. If you're interested in the LLB, apply as soon as possible. We'll give you a decision as quickly as we can. There isn't a fixed closing date. We will process offers essentially throughout the summer months. And just one note again, I'm not sure if there are anybody in this category in this seminar, but if you are a graduate of the BA in law in Galway, you don't need to apply through this external process. We will be in touch with you to progress you because we regard the LLB as a logical continuation for you. You may also be concerned about the cost. If you are an Irish student or European, the LLB is a graduate degree, so it does not come within the terms of the so-called free fees scheme. Not that there are other costs associated with going to university and capitation fees and so on. So it's not like it is free. But there is, you do need to bear in mind that particularly if you're coming from within Ireland, there is that additional cost involved. There is the possibility of SUSI funding for eligible students. That is means tested. Best to work with us if you're thinking of applying to SUSI, because we can generally help you to frame your application appropriately so that SUSI will see it as a logical continuation of what you've done already. I'm just about at the end of this presentation, but I will say that, as I said, I'm going to hear on the other side of Anna's presentation to answer questions. But if there are other questions that either you don't want to ask in this webinar or that occur to you afterward, then that's my email address there on the slide. You might want to take a note of that. Just if you are taking note of that, the M in between my first and last name is actually quite important. I have a namesake elsewhere in the institution, so be sure to put that in. General queries you can address to Law Postgrad, and we're on all of the standard social media services as well. So thanks very much for your attention, and I will hand you back to Lisa now.
Perfect. Thank you, Ronan. If anyone has any questions, you can begin to put them in the live chat. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce you to a student of ours, Anna Carroll. So Anna, thank you very much for joining us today. I see you're in the office today. You might tell us where you are today.
So hi everybody, my name is Anna Carroll, and I've just finished the LLB. So I just finished my final year exams for the LLB about 3 weeks ago, and I'm currently working as a legal policy advisor at the Irish delegation to the UN in New York. So I'm calling in from the office in New York at the moment. So I work on the legal team here. I cover human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, UN sanctions, and law of the sea. So it's a really interesting job. I've really enjoyed it. And the university were really accommodating in helping me balance my studies with also taking up this job here shortly after finishing the degree.
That's great. Thanks, Anna. And I suppose to begin with, could you actually tell us the reason why you decided to study the LLB?
So I did the BA in law with sociology and politics. I started college in 2016 and graduated in 2019. And then straight after university, I interned with the Department of Foreign Affairs and then with UN Women in Geneva at the Human Rights Council. And then following that, I went on to a job as an advisor at the Irish mission to the UN in 2020 and worked there for about 3 years. and I was interested in continuing to work at the UN on legal and human rights issues. And generally speaking, UN jobs require you to have a master's degree. And I was interested in doing a master's in law specifically. So I came back to do the 1 year LLB so that I would have a qualifying law degree to help me apply for LLM degrees, especially in the US and UK. And so I've recently received my LLM offers. And I haven't had a chance to catch Ronan enough on this, but he was really kindly advising me. But I've received offers from Oxford, Cambridge, Columbia, and NYU for LLM degrees. So ideally, I'll be going to Cambridge or to Columbia in the autumn. So very much have achieved what I had hoped to from the LLB degree. But also for me, I had studied a couple of human rights topics during my undergrad degree. So I took European human rights law with Donica O'Connell, which I really enjoyed. But the LLB offers a much wider range of human rights law subjects than were available during my BA degree. So this year I was able to take public international law and international protection of human rights with Kira Smith. And I also took protection of prisoners under international law and comparative disability law. So even having been working in human rights law for 3 or 4 years after college, I found that going back gave me a really, really helpful further education in international law and human rights law. And I felt that it really supplemented my understanding of my work. So since coming back to the UN here, I felt that my work has become a lot easier and that I have a much better understanding of it having taken those classes. So that was another really big bonus of the LLB.
That's great. Thank you, Anna. I was going to ask you what your favorite parts of the LLB was, but from listening to you speak there, it sounds like the human rights modules were your favorite.
Yeah, I felt really lucky to be on campus with the Irish Centre for Human Rights because there are a lot of really, really wonderful academics at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. So particularly in international protection of human rights, that class was taught through a series of guest lectures. So we had the opportunity to have a lecture from Professor Siobhan Mullally, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on trafficking in persons, but also from several PhD students at the Irish Centre for Human Rights talking about their research, and from Professor Ray Murphy, who works on international humanitarian law. So I really had the opportunity to learn from academics who are very well respected in their field. And particularly, I really liked being in Galway this year because I found that the academics at the Irish Centre for Human Rights are very principled and have a lot of academic integrity in terms of doing really interesting critical human rights work, which was very refreshing for me, having come from working in a diplomatic area where there's a different approach to human rights. So yeah, I really enjoyed the human rights modules, but I also did a minor thesis supervised by Ray Murphy on international humanitarian law, and that was also really rewarding for me.
That's great. Thank you, Anna. And I suppose just on the workload, could you tell us a little bit about what the course workload was like? And I suppose did you have time for extracurricular activities?
So the workload, I think Ronan said earlier, you have 10 to 12 hours of lectures per week, depending on the modules that you take. And then I also had about 3 hours of tutorials every second week, which are for small group teaching in specific subjects. I chose to take quite a lot of continuous assessment, especially in my second semester. So I chose to take classes where I was able to write papers and essays rather than taking a lot of exams. So I tried to treat it as sort of a 9 to 6 job, like when I'm working in the office, and to put in about 40 hours a week between lectures and working on assignments and studying. So I had time to go to yoga classes and do rock climbing and go out with friends and things like that outside of my academic commitments. When I was in my undergrad degree, the hours were quite similar. I also would have had between 12 and 15 hours of lectures per week. I was really heavily involved with the Law Society and the Debating Society. So I think it's very possible, if you're interested, to combine your studies with involvement in extracurricular activities. And I think for law students, the Law Society and the Debating Society are really enjoyable to join. So I went to the World Debating Championships and the European Debating Championships during my undergrad. So I was able to travel to South Africa and Serbia with the university. So there are all those opportunities available as well if you're interested.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anna.